Hello, welcome to MSS Grade channel. In this video, we're going to see how to save the email attachments based on the email category. Assume there is an Outlook and you're receiving an email from a different people or from a different organization. You have applied a category based on the rule. Then we're going to see how to get the category details from the email and save the attachments based on the category to a specific folder in the SharePoint. Let's start doing the Power Automate. This is my email inbox. So here in this email inbox, whenever I receive an email, I have already added a rule. You can see I have two rules already added. So based on the subject, any email which are received from my other email ID and the subject is supplier, it will automatically categorize as supplier category, and any email with the subject vendor, it will categorize as vendor category. So this is added in the inbox or in the Outlook. So by the rule, it will automatically categorize the email which it arrives. Some of the sample categorization you can see here. What we're going to do is that when an email arrives and categorized, we're going to read this email category from a Power Automate and save the attachments into the SharePoint. This is the SharePoint which I already have created under the site, and you can see there are two folders. So under these folders, when I send an email, the attachment should come under these folders. Vendor email should come and a supply email should come with the attachments added here. Let's start with the Power Automate now. I've created a new Power Automate, save email attachment based on category. This is the name, and the trigger point is when a new email arrives. So what I'm going to do is that when a new email arrives, I'm starting the process of getting the categories. So the first process is that email category is not available from the normal Outlook or the Outlook connectors which comes with the Power Automate. So we should use Graph connector. So to use the Graph API, I have a separate video how to use Graph API and the endpoints. In this, I will just directly go through what is the endpoint we should use for Graph API. To use the Graph API, search for send HTTP, and this send HTTP you should see several categories, but we are interested in Outlook, so we just get send HTTP within the Outlook alone. See more. Let's see whether you can find the send HTTP request. Yeah, you can see here you have a send an HTTP request here. Select this. So once you select the send an HTTP request, it would have the endpoint, which is the URL, and the get method and additional parameters which you are in. We are interested only in the URL. So to get message detail, we need to call a predefined URL. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add the URL. This is the Graph API URL to get the message detail, a particular message detail, and you need to pass the message ID. From the previous activity, you can select the message ID. So you can see here, this is the URL form. Basically, I'm getting extra additional details of the email through Graph API. So I'm going to just save this and test it out. And we need to test it out once. Why? Because when the email arrives, we need to know the output JSON format, which is which you get it from send an HTTP request, because later we are going to parse this JSON format which is found from the send an HTTP request. So let's trigger an email so that it can execute, and we can see the output. Okay, so this is the Power Automate. What I'm going to do is that I already have selected 2 email, so this is one of the sample email which I have already selected. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to send this email and it will be triggered, and it should tag it to vendor. Okay, so let's see. So I'm just sending the email. Let's wait for this Power Automate to trigger. Let's go to the email and wait for the email to arrive. So I have sent the email to this inbox. Hopefully it arrives in a minute. So you can see here the email arrives and automatically it has been tagged as a vendor. That's an Outlook rule which happens, so it is automatically tagged. And when we go back to the Power Automate, I should be able to see the action. See here, it has already triggered. So once it has triggered, we should get, you can see here when an email arrives, it gets a detail. It has an additional detail. You should go to the raw output, show raw output. So this is the JSON which we are interested. Why? Because this JSON has all the details of the email, particular email which is not from the out of the box email trigger. So this is the JSON which we need to copy this JSON. Completely you need to copy the full JSON here. Okay, copy the JSON and have it in your notepad maybe. So in my case I'm just putting it into my notepad. Okay, so this is the JSON I just copied. So now we need to go back to the edit, Power Automate, and we should go to edit, go back, edit the Power Automate. When you are editing the Power Automate, now what you should do is that we should add the parse JSON activity. So the parse JSON activity will take the payload. So just paste that. You can paste the JSON which has been sent, and if you notice at this JSON, you can see there is a categories here. So categories is an array, meaning you can tag multiple categories to an email. So that's why it is an array. So what we are going to do is that we are interested in getting this detail from the JSON file. So that's why we have a parse JSON. It will automatically create the schema. So now I'm just going to wire this up to the previous JSON. So see here, send an HTTP request. So I'm just going to send the body. So when you send the body, this is the schema, then you will get the categories. Okay, so I have saved here. So now once you get the JSON file and the categories are present in that JSON, so after that what we're going to do is that we're going to save that category into an array. So we need to declare a variable. So let the variable be categories, and always I use var for a variable. Just name it such a way you know that, and it is going to be an array, and you don't need to initialize. We can initialize it to the JSON categories, body categories. You can see here from the previous, I'm just assigning the categories. So basically we are parsing this JSON and assigning the categories right away here. Save it for a while. So far the progress has been saved. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to assign a variable for the SharePoint site. So initialize a variable for SharePoint URL, so that you can use a parameter for the site. Okay, site URL, it's going to be a string, and we have the SharePoint. This is the SharePoint. Just take the site URL. So this is the site URL, you need to copy and then paste it here. This is the site URL. Why? Because I'm just going to make use of this parameter subsequently for the SharePoint site to save the file. Okay, so now we have site URL. Let's change this to a proper name. So site URL, this is just the name, it can be anything, you can type anything here. Just for make sure that the activity contains a site URL, I'm just naming it properly. And I'm going to declare another variable, initialize. This variable at this time it is going to be a path. So path is nothing but the folder name. So remember, we need to have setting it to null. Okay, just a null. I'm initializing this path to null. This path is the folder. Remember that in SharePoint we have two folders. So I'm going to save the path of this folder subsequently in my Power Automate. So for initializing, I just put it as null. So as usual, I'm just renaming it to var and then path. Okay, so save it. So progress, it has been saved successfully. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is that for each of category, so remember that category is an array. Example, an email can be tagged into multiple categories. So for each category, I'm going to iterate and then save the document based on the category. So what we need to do is that I need to add apply to each. So apply to each, and here apply to each is will take an array. So probably we can use the categories. I'm going to iterate and for each category. So you might have multiple categories. It would be very ugly to use if condition. You can use if condition here, but in this situation you can use switch for the condition. Select the switch. So once you click on the switch, it will automatically add the default and you would see the switch operation, and you can get the current item from for each. Okay, apply to each, I'm getting the current category. So basically what it does is that categories array, it will run for each categories. So for example, if a mail is tagged with vendor and supplier, it will run twice. So it will run for vendor as well as for supplier, and when it comes for the vendor, it will look for the switch, and we need to add a switch case. So here I'm going to add vendor. Okay, and I'm going to add one more case, which is supplier. That's it. So this is vendor and this is supplier. So for the vendor, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to set the path of the SharePoint. So for a vendor, you need to set a path saying that, let me add set variable. Okay, set variable, choose set variable here and select the path, and you need to identify the vendor. So this is a vendor condition, so we need to get the vendor URL. Remember that you should copy the whole URL. So you should always copy email documents or the document folder name / the folder name. Make sure that you copy it properly and you can put it here. Okay, make sure that you have a / as well. This is very important because this would be appended to your site URL. So / email document / vendor reports. So for vendor, and similarly we need to repeat the same for the supplier. I'm just pasting the supplier, and here we need to change the folder to supplier folder, supplier reports. supplier reports. Okay, and this variables I'm setting it. Save the progress. So the progress has been saved, and if you notice here there is one more default condition. We need to use that. Why? Because assume that when there is an email with an attachment coming in without a category, so automatically it would pass into default. So you need to handle a situation where there is no category. So for that, what I'm going to add is that I'm going to, if there is no category, I'm going to set it to null. Okay, so if there is no category, I am going to set it to null. Add here. Yeah, so this is for null. We can specify here, so probably set vendor path, and this one set supplier path, and here set empty path. Okay, that's it. So now we set all the path. Now we're going to do, what we're going to do is that based on this condition, we going to use save the file into the SharePoint. So now with this switch condition, assume that if the path is empty, so we need to find out, add a condition to eliminate the empty path, like condition. So in the condition, what we need to specify is that assume that if the path is empty, we need to specify the condition. So when the path is not equal to empty, okay, leave it blank, don't touch anything. You don't need to add null, so just leave it blank. So basically what we are doing is that assume that if an email is not tagged with any category, it would come into the switch, the path will be empty. Then we are checking if the path is not empty, then start processing it, or else just ignore it. Okay, so that's how we are going. It's a precautionary measure to make sure that we process only the email with the category. So now what we need to do is that we need to get the attachment. So get the attachment from the email. So get attachments. Get attachments from the email, this one. And when you add the get attachment, the attachment gets the message ID. So you should get the previous message. When the email arrives, then the message. So is the message ID. So the message ID is here, and the attachment ID. Attachment ID is also from the message, so you should get it from the attachment ID. So attachment ID is this attachment ID. So once you select the attachment ID, notice that for each is automatically added, meaning you are getting each attachment. If the email contains 4 attachments, you should get all the attachments. So you're running in loop for each. So once you get the attachment, you need to create a file. Create a file in the SharePoint. So create a file in a SharePoint, it takes the site URL. So here you can directly select the site pp, or you can pass the site URL. Why there is a site URL parameter? In some cases you can parameterize the site URL, but in this case you can directly select the pp. And the folder path, this path will vary. So what you should do is that you should click here and use the path. Okay, because sometimes the path is vendor path, sometimes the path is supplier path, so it is dynamic. File name will be the attachment name, so you should use this get attachment. Remember, there is a get attachment, and get the name, and you get the file content also. File content, get attachment, you should get content byte. That's it. So once you create a file, this file will be automatically saved into the SharePoint. Let me save the progress. Okay, the progress has been saved. So now for each attachment it is saved into SharePoint. So I think most of the operations are done, so we are good to go, ready to go to save the attachments. Let me test this. To test it, you need to send an email. So now what I am going to do is that I am going to send an email with the supplier, so the supplier should process and save it in the supplier email folder. Okay, so I already have the supplier email with one attachment. So whenever it is sent to supplier, it should tag and Power Automate should trigger and you should save it in the SharePoint. Let's send the email and wait. Send the email. Let me wait for that email. There's the previous email, so let's wait for the supplier email to come. So the email has arrived. You can see the supplier, it has tagged to supplier. Let's go back to the Power Automate. Let's see whether it has triggered. Need to check whether it has triggered the email with the supplier, and then it will start to process. Okay, it has started. See here, it has started running. So once it has started running, it has succeeded. Let's go to SharePoint. Hopefully there is a file there in the supplier. See here. So it works. So basically you can even see that it is in few seconds before. So it has taken the attachment from the email and it has saved into this folder, which is a supplier folder. Let's see what it is done. So let's see here, when an email arrives, it goes to the Graph API, gets the categories, and it runs for each categories. You can see here supplier, there is only one category supplier, and it goes to the supplier switch and it gets the attachment. So there is only one attachment, so that's why it is 1 of 1. Get the attachment and finally you put it into the SharePoint. Okay, so this is how you save the attachment into the SharePoint. There is one more additional step which you can do, which is not mandatory, but you can still you can do one additional step, usually to identify the attachment which has been saved. So basically if you see here in the SharePoint, it is under the supplier folder, but you will not know, over the period of time you will not know from which email this attachment comes from. So either you can save the details of the email, or in SharePoint you can create multiple columns. So in this scenario, see here, I have added additional column like subject, from, and to identify which subject of the email this attachment comes from and from which email it comes from. So those details you can save it directly into SharePoint. See here, this is the file. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add one more additional action, and again I'm telling you this is not mandatory, but mandatory to save the file, but this is additional metadata you are adding into the file. Okay, so update file properties. Okay, update file properties. It takes the same address, pp, and the library name. Our library name is the email documents, and the unique ID, you need to get it from the previous one. So item ID, and you see here all the properties are already there. So you need to have a subject, from, and to. Okay, subject, I'm going to get it from the email. When an email is arrived, what is that? When an email arrives, so I'm going to take the subject. From, I'm going to take it from the from, and I'm going to take it from to. Where is it? I don't know, email to. Okay, that's it. So basically I'm just updating some additional metadata for a file. Just save this. It has successfully saved. So to test it out, there are two choices. You can compose another email and send. But there is one more shortcut option. You can open the existing executed flow and you can resubmit it. So usually I test it in this way so that you don't have to send an email again, wait for the email and then the things to trigger. So it has started executing because I just resubmitted it. It had successfully completed as well. So now it should have applied additional properties to the file. Okay, see here. So basically last time there was only one file, just a file, but now we have added additional properties like the subject of the email, from where the email came from, and it was sent to. So this detail is tagged into the file so that next time when you open a document you are sure that from where the document comes from. So hope this is very helpful for you. If you like the video, subscribe it. Thank you.